Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Pastor Dan coming to you from the church. Hope you're enjoying this beautiful day. Um, Finally, the weather is turning, and we're glad to see that. A couple of announcements, and then I thought I would dive into this. I'm sure this is going to come as a surprise, but the new devotions I've picked up called Thy Geekdom Come, 42 fandom inspired devotionals. So I thought we would take a few minutes of devotion time today and just be with one another and hear the word and ponder scripture that comes to us from Matthew 11:14. But first, a few announcements. So far, the weather looks okay for Sunday worship. Please keep your eye on your emails for that. We will keep you updated as we did last week. But right now, the last time I checked, the weather looked good with a high of 69 or 70 and a low of 54 with partly sunny skies. So I'm holding my breath, I'm crossing my fingers, and I'm praying that we can be together outside in the yard this week. Please remember to bring your own chairs, to wear your masks. Know that we'll have a table outside with hand sanitizer and wipes and a basket for in-person offering if you choose to bring it inside to bring it in. We still will have virtual offering available. We also will I'm going blank here. It will also be a communion service. We will have little of the prepackaged communion cups available, but if you choose to, you can bring your own bread or wine or grape juice for the service of communion if we're outdoors. If we're indoors, we'll still be in setting 8, a new setting, and Boyd will be leading us through that. So trying something new, regardless of whether we're indoors or outdoors. It'll be our setting for the summer, and we're looking forward to that. And then, we will gather to worship on Sunday and be together and enjoy these beautiful days. Also, there's a sign-up genius in the e-news. I would ask that you please sign up for outdoor worship with your name and contact information, or your name and your email address, just in case we need to do contact tracing for any reason whatsoever. We will also have a notebook at the church on that table for all of you to sign up if you forget to sign up on the Sign Up Genius for worship. So again, weather's looking okay right now for outdoor worship on Sunday. Bring your own chairs. We will have communion cups available, but you can bring your own communion if you would like, your own bread and wine. We will ask that you come with masks, and we will have hand sanitizer and wipes available on the table, along with an offering basket. And the bathrooms will be open and available for the service as well. So right now the weather is okay, and we're gonna move forward as such. But please keep your eye on your emails and the Facebook page if anything changes. Second announcement: if you have a family member or a child or someone who's interested in confirmation, there's also a Sign Up Genius in that as well. Just trying to figure out the group we have heading into the fall. We've been fortunate in that Heather Miranda has been doing a great job leading our youth and have been engaged in several of the things that are incorporated in confirmation, including some service projects. So we're grateful for that. Which reminds me, we'll also be having a youth group campfire on May 7th here at the church, weather dependent, to get people gathered together outside as the weather improves and we can share in some fellowship and devotions with one another. So there's 2 sign-up geniuses in the e-news. There's one for outdoor worship, which please sign up. It goes through the end of June, so while you're at it, just take a look at the dates and sign up for whichever dates you think you'll be available. And there's one for confirmation as well. Good morning, Lois. Note that Pint with the Pastor will happen tomorrow night at 8 o'clock on Zoom. That will be with me, and we will gather again, and you can bring whatever beverage or meal you would like and join me on Zoom at 8 o'clock for that. And Saturday, weather dependent, we will be doing Hike with the Pastor, Prayer Hike with the Pastor. This week we will be doing, we will be going to the Brimfield Rail Trail, just out heading into Brimfield towards, on Route 20, to the parking lot at the end of that trail. It will be a parking lot on the left as you're out on Route 20. Please be in touch with me if you need more information. You can also search it on your GPS, Brimfield Rail Trail. Do not go to the 5 Bridges. That's the wrong parking lot. We want the parking lot on Route 20, which is the very end of the rail trail. And we will shoot to meet there at 10 o'clock as we wait a little bit for people to arrive. For that, excuse me. Those are the big announcements for this week. Know that your executive team and council are working hard as we look at what worship looks like going forward, especially with new guidelines being released yesterday. We are gathering in conversation over the next week or 10 days to discuss and plan and evaluate where we're at. So once again, I thank you for your patience and resilience in this year as we begin to see new hope and the spirit of resurrection as we move forward together as a church community. With all that being said, I'm going to invite us into a time of devotions. And if you've just logged on, we're going to be reading, hearing the word from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14. And we'll be reflecting on a devotion that comes to us from Thy Geekdom Come, which is offer fascinating takes on scriptural reflections through different superheroes and movies and any kinds of pop culture, things like that. And I am one for that. So I thought we would give it a shot together today on Facebook Live. So I will ask you to still your hearts and minds as we prepare to be in a time of reflection together. And if there are any prayer requests you have this morning, please feel free to put them in the chat, or if you're watching this later, please send them on to me so I can be aware of what's on your hearts and minds today. We begin with a reading from the Gospel of Matthew, the 14th chapter. At the time Herod the ruler heard the news about Jesus, he said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He's been raised from the dead. This is why these miraculous powers are at work through him." Herod had arrested John, bound him, and put him in prison because of Herodias, the wife of Herod's brother Philip. That's because John told Herod, "It's against the law for you to marry her." Although Herod wanted to kill him, he feared the crowd because they thought John was a prophet. But at Herod's birthday party, Herodias' daughter danced in front of their guests and thrilled Herod. Then he swore to give her anything she asked. At her mother's urging, the girl said, "Give me the head of John the Baptist, here on a plate." Although the king was upset because of the solemn pledge and his guests, he commanded that they give it to her. Then he had John beheaded in prison. They brought his disciple on a plate. They brought his heads on a plate and gave it to the young woman, and she brought it to her mother. But John's disciples came and took his body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus what happened. When Jesus heard about John, he withdrew in a boat to a deserted place by himself. When the crowds learned this, they followed him on foot from the cities. When Jesus arrived and saw a large crowd, he had compassion for them and healed those who were sick. That evening, his disciples came and said to him, "This is an isolated place and it's getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go into the village and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said to them, "There's no need to send them away. You give them something to eat." He said, "Bring them here to me." he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. He took the 5 loaves of bread and the 2 fish, looked up to heaven, blessed, and broke the loaves apart and gave them to his disciples. Then the disciples gave them to the crowds. Everyone ate until they were full, and they filled 12 baskets with the leftovers. About 5,000 men, plus women and children, had eaten. Right then, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead to the other side of the lake while he dismissed the crowds. When he sent them away, he went up onto a mountain by himself to pray. Evening came, and he was alone. Meanwhile, the boat, fighting a strong headwind, was being battered by the waves and was already far away from land. Very early in the morning, he came to his disciples walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost." They were frightened, and they screamed. Just then Jesus spoke to them. "Be encouraged. It's me. Don't be afraid." Peter replied, "Lord, if it's you, order me to come to you on the water." And Jesus said, "Come." Then Peter got out of the boat and was walking on the water toward Jesus. But when Peter saw the strong wind, he became frightened. As he began to sink, he shouted, "Lord, rescue me." Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him, saying, "You men of weak faith, why did you begin to have doubts?" When they got into the boat, the wind settled down. And those in the boat worshipped Jesus and said, "You must be God's son." When they had crossed the lake, they landed at Gennesaret. When the people who lived in that place recognized him, they sent word throughout the whole region, and they brought to him everyone who was sick. Then they begged him that they might just touch the edge of his clothes. Everyone who touched him was cured. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Our devotional from Thy Geekdom comes from chapter 13, called The Compassion of Wonder Woman. It begins with a quote, "I will fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." Diana Prince, Wonder Woman. As an Amazonian demigoddess, Wonder Woman is the epitome of power. Not only is she physically strong and able to take on the god of war himself, but she is also mentally mighty. Even in an unfamiliar culture, she's confident, even in the midst of battle. She's level-headed, even when she's lost everyone she loves. She carries on. Wonder Woman is a warrior, and she simultaneously embodies another trait: compassion. Her compassion is there when she stands up for Steve Trevor, though no one else will. It's there when she liberates the village of Veld. It's there when she tells Charlie they need him as a part of the group, not for his sharpshooting ability, which he seems to have lost because of PTSD, but because of his singing. Compassion isn't a built-in personality trait or something we only direct as a select group. Wonder Woman's compassion is demonstrated by distinct decisions she makes. She has the option to look away instead of encouraging her teammates, or to leave the humans to their own problems and let them destroy each other. At each opportunity, she can choose herself instead of other people, but she doesn't. When Ares tries to convince her to join him, she says, "I used to want to save the world, to end war and bring peace to mankind. But then I glimpsed the darkness that lives within their light. I learned that inside every one of them, there will always be both. The choice each must make for themselves, something no hero will ever defeat. And now I know only love can truly save the world. So I stay, I fight, and I give for the world I know can be." Wonder Woman's compassion comes from choosing love over herself every time, not just feeling sorry for someone, but deciding to do something about their predicament. And with each consistent choice, she cultivates compassion into a part of her person until it becomes second nature to her. When Jesus is on earth during the time of the Gospels, he shows compassion left, right, and center. Many of the Gospel accounts are records of him healing the sick and disabled. He sees people in need and he does something about it. Yet even Jesus needs time to himself. When he hears news of John the Baptist's death, he withdraws onto a boat to be alone. perhaps needing space to grieve. When he steps back onto land, there's a giant crowd waiting for him, just what a grieving person needs, to be surrounded by people looking for inspiration. Jesus could ask his disciples to order the crowd away. Instead, he has compassion for them and cured the sick. In not leaving the crowd for his disciples to handle alone, Jesus is also being mindful of his disciples who, having just returned from exhausting solo missions, only to hear John has been executed, are likely discouraged and drained. When the disciples suggest sending the people off at dusk, Jesus refuses, instead multiplying 5 loaves and 2 fish to feed the 5,000 instead of letting them fend for themselves. By showing compassion to physically, spiritually, and emotionally hungry people, Jesus demonstrates his purpose on earth, to physically represent God's love for all, his people to save the lost, to heal brokenness by taking it upon himself. We, in turn, are to emulate a compassion for others that rivals Jesus and Wonder Woman's, demonstrating that compassion and strength go hand in hand. Sometimes this means caring about things that we wouldn't normally. Sometimes it means caring about things that are incredibly difficult to care about. For instance, we are compassionate toward a local police officer who may face a bullet in the chest today simply for trying to do her job. Are we compassionate towards the African American whose heart pounds every time an officer passes him on the street, afraid that he'll be treated unjustly simply for looking suspicious? And here's the real question: are we compassionate towards both these people? Because God calls us to love all, even someone we might consider an enemy. But I say to you that listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. That comes from Luke 6, 27 to 28. Following these instructions is not for the faint of heart. Showing compassion, especially to those who don't seem like they deserve it, though those we don't understand and those we are prejudiced against, takes incredible strength. We can radiate compassion like Wonder Woman, and Christ assists us by example. By accepting his compassion and sacrifice, we are empowered to show compassion to others. Because he so freely offers up his love and values us no matter what. We can use his forgiveness and understanding to model our own relationships and the way we treat others, fighting for love and those who feel powerless to do so themselves. And they're reading from Colossians. As God's chosen one, holy and beloved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Colossians 3, chapter 12. Reflection question for today for all of us to ponder. How can we be more compassionate, considering that compassion is more of a conscious choice than a built-in personality trait? How can we be more compassionate, considering that compassion is more of a conscious choice than a built-in personality trait? Part 2. What are some barriers you face in showing compassion to others? Perhaps anger, bitterness, suspicion, or dislike. What can you do in the next week, month, year, and decade to overcome these barriers? I think that in a world that is so divided right now, that there is a deep, deep need for us to show compassion to one another. It doesn't necessarily mean we agree. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to see eye to eye all the time. And there are, in fact, times when we need to take a hard stand against things that are wrong, against things that violate the ministry of Jesus Christ and the God message that comes to us through the gospel and scripture. But I think if we could show just a little more compassion to one another as a whole, as a society, in this time and in this place, especially as we continue to exist in this weird pandemic space, and recognizing that we've all been through a trauma and that we've all continued to been forced to alter our way of living for a long period of time. I think the words that come to mind are grace and compassion, to leave room for kindness and to be gentle with one another. I think that is the word these days, especially as we begin to come back and we begin to restore things, begin to normalize a little bit. Not that it will be the same, because this is an event that certainly will mark us and change us for a good long while. But to give space for those who are struggling in some way, which I think in many ways is all of us, who have grieved the loss of family members, who are dealing with illness, fighting COVID, dealing with long-term symptoms of COVID, a disruption to jobs, a disruption to a way of life that we're used to. I'm still, the idea of going to a movie or sitting in an indoor restaurant right now still is something that I can't wrap my head around, because something that would be so easy to do beforehand is it's hard to think about now. So I think our way forward is through grace and compassion and kindness to one another. And quite frankly, through love, as we heard in the devotion, and that we'll actually hear a lot about in the lesson from 1 John that comes to us this Sunday as the New Testament lesson. Talking about abiding in love, talking about Christ's love abiding in us, compassion, grace, mercy, understanding, all fit under that umbrella of love. So I think that's where I'm at this morning. That's what I'm thinking about as we get close to the 14th month of pandemic. And though things are starting to loosen up a little bit, and we at Bethlehem are about to have conversations about our way forward here, and continue to do so. Be gentle with one another, have grace, have compassion with one another, with strangers, with neighbors, with friends, with family. I think that's a place we want to be. So that's all I have for today. Peace be with you all. Blessings on your day. If you want to talk about this more, feel free to reach out. Happy to sit down and with the weather outside, happy to gather outside and reflect on that a little more. But until then, be well, and we will see you hopefully outside for worship on Sunday, or on Zoom for Pint with a Pastor on Thursday, or at the Brimfield Rail Trail at 10 o'clock on Saturday, as the weather dictates. So keep your eye out for all that information in the e-news as well, especially with the signups for worship and for confirmation. And we will talk to you soon. Be well.